What's going on, operators, and welcome back to another video. Today in the studio, we've got the Tikka T3X TAC A1 in Coyote Brown, chambered in 308. This is our de facto precision rifle. We've taken this thing out as far as about 966 yards, so it's a very good candidate to talk about what we're here to actually talk about, which is the Vector Optics Gen 2 Tauron 4-32 by 56. This is their precision rifle scope, one of several that they have. They've sent this out kindly for us to review and have a look at. So today we're going to go through some first impressions, some stuff that comes in the box, some really cool features, including some really awesome science in the glass, and then finally some conclusions based on those first impressions. Now, we have also shot a second video that is going to be at the range, and we had a little friendly competition with my AC Max. So make sure to stay tuned for that. We'll be publishing that soon after this one goes live. That being said, of course, there was no money changing hands. They have agreed to our review policy as it can be found on CanadianOperator.ca. So as usual, our opinions will be our own. We've got no incentive to say anything good or bad about the optic, simply just our observations and honest feelings about the optic. So that being said, thank you so much to them for supplying this full review. Now you can find an affiliate link down in the description if you'd like to pick one of these up at the end of this video or perhaps at the end of the range video. You can do so by using the link down below and using the code CANOP10 to get yourself 10% off your optic or anything else you might be buying on Vector Optics website. Thanks again to Vector Optics for sponsoring today's video. All right, fellas, so let's briefly talk about some of the stuff that you get here with the optic. These are some value-added items that are just tossed into the box for free for you, and then that's pretty nice. Now, while a lot of the stuff does seem very basic, there is one of them that is potentially going to save you potentially in the hundreds of dollars, so stick around. So the first thing that you're going to get is a little sunshade here. We've got some threads on this side, nice and smooth on this side. This is made of T6 aluminum, 6061. It's probably the same aluminum that's being used to make the optic. That's just going to thread onto the front end of your optic here, and that's going to prevent any extra sunbeams from kind of coming in and bouncing around and making a lot of reflections, making it hard to see on very sunny days. So nice that that's included. Kind of par for the course for stuff that's in this price range, but definitely nice to see that. We have a few tools included here as well. So you do get a little range tool here. This is going to help you to get into your elevation and your windage turret to open up the caps on the top to be able to get into your zero stop. Now I say caps, they're just very thin caps on the very top. The turrets themselves are not capped, which means they are tactical design, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So this is going to allow you to get in there. And then of course you do have a little Allen key here as well. And this Allen key is going to allow you to adjust that zero stop. And by the way, if you don't know what a zero stop is or some of the other stuff that we talk about here, we did make a video earlier called Anatomy of a Rifle Scope, which might help explain some of these things to you. If you still have any questions, make sure to leave them below or come and join us on our Discord. Link for that is in the description. So next up, we've got a little baggie here, and inside this baggie you have a little chamois that you can use to clean your lenses. The only thing I'm going to say about this is while this was a really nice include, it's really, really, really important to blow any debris off of your lenses with a little air blower, or even if you have an electrical air blower, whatever it is, just a little bit of air onto the lenses before you clean them, because the last thing you want to do is have debris on your lenses after going out hunting or sport shooting or whatever you're doing. Your lenses are kind of mucked up a little bit, and then you're spreading that all over your multi-coated lenses with the chamois. So in that case, you're actually doing more damage than you're doing good. So just keep that in mind. And if I can find one that's nice and cheap that I use with my photography and videography equipment, I'll make sure to link one down below so you guys can check it out. They're only a few bucks. They're going to save you potentially hundreds or thousands if you take care of your optics. So the next thing that's included is going to be this. It's just a pair of rubberized tethered lens caps. There's no branding here. A little bit of a missed opportunity from Vector. I think I would have liked to put my logo on these. They just seem like a very generic pair. And while they do work just fine, so if you see, we'll put this on the ocular lens, we'll put this on the objective lens here, and it is a little loose, so we're going to go ahead and crisscross the cables here, and we are good to go. Now, while it's really nice that they included this, this is probably going to be my first criticism, other than, of course, the lack of branding. I do think that this is a missed opportunity because once you put your sunshade on, right, you're going to have an issue because this is no longer really going to be long enough to fit. I mean, you probably can make it work, but what I would have liked to see, especially from an aesthetic perspective, not to mention, the functional perspective of being able to use your sunshade without having to worry about it, is that you can 3D print anything for pennies on the dollar these days. So companies that are making optics probably have access to things like injection molding equipment, and they can make these really nice premium hard lens caps that flip up with their logos on them fairly easily and probably very cost effectively as well. So if Vector's listening, this is something that I'd like to see. It's not a huge complaint, but it's just something that increases the perceived value of your product, and it kind of makes customers think that you've kind of planned things out, right? So while it's nice just to toss in a generic pair of lens covers, something that is, a hard flip up branded design, I think that would have been better. So let's go ahead and move on to the last thing here. And this is the part that you could potentially save hundreds of dollars if you're buying this optic versus if you're buying an optic here in North America, where really the trend is not to include this, which is kind of wild. And that's going to be the scope rings. So for those of you guys who have been around firearms long enough, scope rings can be very expensive depending where you get them from, especially once you start to move up into PRS shooting, higher end rifles, longer magnifications, more science in the optic itself in terms of the quality of the glass and the construction. You're going to be pairing that with higher quality rings because you don't want to have any vulnerabilities, any areas where you could potentially lose accuracy. So these ones are actually manufactured by Vector Optics themselves, as far as I know, and they are included with the optic, which is amazing. The last thing I want to do after spending a certain amount of money, and we're not going to talk about the price of the optic here, folks. You can check out the link down below if you want to see what it is. We are a wife-friendly channel here, fellas, so we're not going to get you in trouble with your better half, so not to worry. But if you are spending a good amount of money on an optic, the last thing you want to do after getting so excited to mount it and take it out shooting is realize that you can't mount it and you have to spend hundreds more, whether it's getting a pair of rings or a single piece mount or a cantilever mount. And just to let you guys know, the one that I had on my 5-25 that I've now borrowed to my buddy Sammy, it was between $200 and $300. It was a very expensive mount for just mounting an optic. So the fact that these are included here, it's really nice. And I gotta say, this seems to be a bit of an Asian phenomenon. I've been to China numerous times. I'm actually going back later this year and digressing a lot here, but we may even have a chance to film some stuff at their factory over at Vector because we've been talking back and forth. But nevertheless, when you buy stuff in China and most places in Asia, you tend to kind of get everything that you need for the product to work right out of the box. Hence, scope rings, nice sunshade, all the tools you need, some lens caps, a cleaning cloth. You buy a phone, you get the same stuff, right? You get a case, you get a charger, you get a USB cable, you get a screen protector, you get a bunch of extras. Sometimes you even get earbuds, which is unheard of these days, right? We don't even get chargers in North America. So the fact that you get everything that you need here, that's really nice. And one of the most expensive things is going to be the rings. So really nice to see that. In any case, let's go ahead and move on to some of the science here. I want to talk about some of the specs front to back as we usually do with our firearm reviews. And then we'll wrap it up and talk about what I thought overall. Now, keep in mind, again, we do have a second video coming with the range day, so make sure to stay tuned and subscribe for that. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk about some of the science behind this because it's actually pretty cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about some of the features of the optic here. It is a 4-32 by 56, so that should tell you that we've got 4x magnification on the lowest end, 32x on the highest end, and of course, while we do have some adjustments in between, the by 56 refers to the 56mm objective lens. So we have our objective lens here, ocular lens with the diopter adjustment here. We'll get that in a minute. Since we're talking about the glass, we should talk about some of the cool science that goes into the glass. And in this case, they are multi-coated lenses and they have an ED and a LARI component to them. The ED is extra low dispersion glass, so it helps with things like color fringing, otherwise known as chromatic aberration. And a LARI, it's quite interesting, actually just learned this as I was putting this video together, stands for lanthanide rare earth element. And it refers to a way of manufacturing optical glass that involves about 15 different components, the major one of which is lanthanum oxide. And essentially what that does is it increases the density of the glass. That increases the refractive index of the glass. And what that means is it allows the glass to bend light a lot more easily. And so you need less material in order to have the same effect. So while that is really cool, what that means to you is for a long-range optic such as this, you're going to get a nice clear view, you're going to get minimal chromatic aberration and color shifting, and you're going to get better contrast. So that's really important because if you're shooting at 50 or 100 meters, might not be as big of a deal, but as you stretch that out to 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000 meters or beyond, you're covering quite a lot of distance, so you're going to have to zoom in quite a bit. And when you do that, you're going to be losing, inevitably, on any optic, quite a bit of contrast, quite a bit of light as well. So having glass that has a high light transmittance rate, like the 93% that they claim on their website, and having technology integrated into the glass that's going to reduce chromatic aberration, increase contrast, clarity, and brightness, that's all stuff that you want. Now, in terms of the construction of the optic, before moving a little further here, this is a 6061 T6 aluminum with anodizing, so that's quite nice. Looks like it is made out of a single piece, which is good. And as we move past the objective lens and the bell here, we get into the tube. The tube is going to be a 34 mil tube. Of course, you don't have to worry about that since you do get the rings included with your purchase as well, so it's quite nice. And then we kind of move on to the bread and butter of the optic here, where we have the side focus parallax adjustment, and then we have our elevation and windage turrets. Now, this is configured in a first focal plane MRAD configuration with their VTA 5 mil reticle. What that means is first focal plane versus second focal plane. So that's basically the location of where the reticle is inside the actual tube of the scope. And then in terms of MRAD versus MOA, the only thing that you really need to know at this point is that it's just two different ways of measuring the same thing. So MRAD tends to use the metric system, MOA tends to use the imperial system, kind of like NATO versus caliber, I guess, if you kind of want to picture it that way. But in any case, so as I may have mentioned before here, we start at 25 meters on the parallax adjustment. We go to infinite. The adjustment itself is stiff, but you don't want it to be loose. And we've had no issues, by the way, with any of the controls coming loose during shooting or transport or anything like that. So that's really a nice plus. Now, in terms of the turrets here, these are going to be exposed tactical turrets, which means that you're going to be able to adjust them without having to worry about taking off a cap first. There are caps on top of these, but they're just on the very top, and you can use the tools included with the optic to open these up so you can adjust your zero stop. Again, I'm not going to really describe what that is. If you know what that is, great. If you don't, then the anatomy of a rifle scope video might help to explain that, or just leave a question down below or join our Discord and we'll be able to help you out figure out what that is. But in any case, zero stops are very important to have in your turrets when you're doing competitive or long range or precision shooting, because it allows you to adjust your zero to a further range and then come back without having to worry about where you were to your previous zero. So that's really nice. In terms of the operation on these, again, they are quite firm and they do feel really nice. They're very tactile and they are quite audible as well. So we'll get a little closer in with the microphone so you can see what this or hear what this sounds like. So that's the elevation turret. There's no slack whatsoever. It does feel really nice. The clicks are very pronounced, audible, and tactile. And then also we do have our windage turret here. So again, very pronounced clicks, very audible, very tactile. Now, there is going to be one complaint here, and that's just something that I've noticed because I'm actively looking for problems. I'm having a really hard time finding them, to be clear, but one of the things that I found here was that there is an inconsistency in the loudness, in the tactility of the elevation turret versus the windage turret. Now, I'm not sure if that would have come across on the microphone, but I definitely did hear that the windage turret was a little louder, a little bit more tactile than the elevation turret here. So the windage turret just a little bit louder than the elevation turret. That's not a huge deal for me, but at the same time, if you're spending good money on an optic, consistency is very important. And this kind of attention to quality is something that people who are buying higher priced optics are going to be looking for. So just something to keep in mind. In terms of function, though, it's not going to affect anything whatsoever. It's absolutely fine. We had no issues at all with that. Just some kind of subjective thing that I've noticed. Now we're going to move on past the other scope ring here onto our zoom ring. We kind of discussed this a little bit. It was in the name, 4 to 32 by 56. So we already talked about what the 56 means. The 4 to 32 just means that on the lowest end here, we have 4x magnification. On the highest end, we have 32x magnification, and we have a bunch in between. Again, lends itself to being a great long distance optic because you have quite a lot of magnification and you're pairing that with good glass, which is important. One thing that I didn't mention, and you have a little nub here that you can attach via a little screw. Those are both included, and this is a little throw lever basically that allows you to very quickly change magnifications. This ring is also going to be very tight and very firm, just like the parallax adjustment is. That's not a big deal. It's not difficult to adjust. It just means that it's going to be firm, but very smooth so that you don't have to worry about your controls moving after the fact. Now, as we move through the eyepiece here, we do also have our diopter adjustment, and this is probably going to be my third and final criticism here, and then I find that while the diopter adjustment is very smooth, and there is a lot of travel here, essentially what we're doing is we're moving the ocular lens further or closer to the rest of the lenses in the eyepiece here, and that's allowing us to focus the reticle itself for people with different eyes. All of our eyes are shaped differently, we have different shaped corneas, we focus differently, and so allowing a diopter adjustment here basically is going to allow everyone to enjoy the optic and see the reticle clearly. Now, that concern that I had was that although this is very smooth, it does feel noticeably easier to adjust than the zoom ring and the parallax adjustment as well. Not that it has moved in when we were doing our testing at the range, so that's important, but it is definitely easier to adjust. That might be a good or a bad thing depending on your explicit tastes, or whether you're being very critical or whether you're not paying too much attention to it. But that being said, from a functional point of view, it doesn't seem to really have an effect. Once you put it into its specific spot, it does stay there, and we did have to make some adjustments between Max and I when we were at the range shooting, since again, our eyes are very different. So he had to make a little adjustment for himself, and so did I, and we didn't have any issues with that. But again, it's something I've noticed, so I wanted to let you know. Now, that's pretty much going to be the full optic there. So if you have any other questions, let us know down below. Come on over to our Discord community. That's also linked in the description to have a chat. But that being said, let's just go ahead and talk about some of my final thoughts and conclusions on the Tauron Gen 2 4-32 and see if I might be worth your money. All right, so finally, let's go ahead and talk about some of our conclusions on our first impressions of the Tauron 4-32 by 56 Gen 2 from Vector Optics. Overall, we're very happy with it. And if you want to know exactly why, then maybe stay tuned for the next couple of minutes. But if you want just a one-and-done recommendation, then I got to tell you that no product in CEO's history has been easier to recommend. So if you'd like to go ahead and grab one, you can use our affiliate link down in the description below, alongside our affiliate code CanOp10, which will save you 10% off your purchase while also helping us out at no additional cost to you. But yeah, if you want to know why we're so happy with it, well, there's a few things. So first and foremost, packaging and presentation. I'm a huge fan of that. And I feel like if you present your products with care, it shows that you take pride in making them to your customers. And your customers really will appreciate that. So I love seeing that. Notwithstanding the fact that this probably traveled quite a distance to get to me, and it was nice that it was properly packaged and I didn't get a broken product in the mail. That being said, in terms of the actual quality of the optic, we were thrilled with it. Everything from the way the body is put together to where the controls are and how easy they are to adjust without adjusting themselves after the fact that the quality of the glass was wonderful, and I got to learn some really cool science that actually went into the lenses that are in this thing. That was actually really cool as well. And just to the whole practical aspect of actually having taken this thing out and shooting with it and being incredibly accurate, being able to see a really nice, bright, wide image with very crisp colors, great contrast, even at 32x magnification. I was actually very surprised, and especially since a lot of the value-added stuff that you get with it, at least this side on the table, being par for the course, the fact that you're range ready out of the box by getting a pair of rings as well, that is absolutely huge. Now consider the fact that this, alongside the Venom 5-25, are about $30 apart from one another, at least in Canadian dollars. Now consider the fact that when you do get the Venom, you have to go and find a way to mount it. You can't just go to the range, mount it, and start shooting. And for a pair of rings, that's $100, $150, $200. And if you're looking to upgrade to a single piece mount, like a cantilever, for example, you're looking at $250 plus, and that's for the entry level stuff. So the fact that you get this right out of the box is really nice. Now, there were a few caveats, and I do want to mention that, not necessarily because I think that these are terrible negative things that change my mind about whether you should buy one or not, but because I legitimately had to try really, really hard to find negative things to say about this thing to balance out this review. And it was really hard to find, and that's why a lot of these findings are very subjective in nature. One of them being that instead of getting these kind of cheap feeling rubber lens caps, that it would have been nice for them to include something that was a hard cap with maybe a neoprene sleeve, a little spring with a flip action on the cap, and maybe a little logo for a little extra flair. It would have only cost them a few bucks, but it would have added so much perceived value to the actual product, which would have been really nice to see. Am I happy to get some lens caps? Yeah, of course, because again, if you're getting a Venom, if you want to get those hard caps yourself, they're going to be pretty expensive. I mean, maybe half or a third of what it would cost you to get the rings, which is kind of insane considering that it's plastic. So yeah, I'm very happy that it's there, but it could have been improved in quality, and the perception of the quality of the entire product as a result would have improved by a lot. One of the other things that I noticed too is that the consistency between the elevation and the windage turret in terms of tactility and sound was very slightly off. At this price point, as a customer, I am looking for that level of inconsistency, and being able to find that here isn't the end of the world. It didn't change the way that the optic necessarily worked. It didn't change that the glass was bright. It didn't change that the reticle was accurate, but it was something that I noticed. And again, it's a perceived quality thing, right? So those are really the only things that I could kind of knock it for. Other than that, I am extremely happy. I would personally purchase this, and I would personally recommend that all of you do as well. Once again, if you do consider doing that, whether or not you're going to watch our range day video, which is coming up very soon, please consider helping us out by using that affiliate code down below with CanOp10 to save yourself 10% off. And thank you in advance for doing that. While we're thanking people here, thank you very much to Vector Optics for sending this over for review. We're very happy with it, and hopefully we'll get to work with them in the future, including perhaps taking a tour of their factory in China, because we're actually going there in September, so I'm very excited about that. But that being said, thank you to all of you for watching, commenting, subscribing, doing all those things that you do on YouTube. It really does help us out. But if you'd like to go a little bit above and beyond, you can definitely help us out by maybe leaving a super thanks if you found this especially helpful, or perhaps just check out CanadianOperator.ca, or maybe, just maybe, get yourself a VIP membership. All of that will be down in the description. Thank you so much, as always, for your trust and your patronage. Really appreciate that, and hope to see you all in the next video. Until then, happy shooting.